What's up, guys? Foxwolf here, and today we are going live to the IBF, ladies and gentlemen, the road to the Undisputed Minimumweight Championship, Chapter 4. So, ladies and gentlemen, the IBF, ladies and gentlemen, was the first inaugural belt in history by moving it straight forward to the good side of town. And, ladies and gentlemen, 1987 wasn't the year to start off with the minimum weight. Now, in all fairness, at least this weight class started off a lot stronger than the Bridger weight because at least the three major weight classes, the WBA, IBF, and WBC, would be together in 87. Well, the WBA would come out a year later in 88. And like I said before, the WBO said the last time it never came until the next year in 89. But yet again, what difference does it make? And ladies and gentlemen, the first inaugural bout started in a 15-round bout in Bukok, South Korea, ladies and gentlemen. A 15-round bout in June the 14th, 1987, where we had our good old friend Kyung Young Lee versus Masaharu Kawakami. For the inaugural belt for the minimum weight champion. The IBF started it all. And surprisingly, Kyung Yun Lee did not have to go 15 rounds in this fight. He only had to last 2 rounds. And after the first round started off dominantly for Kyung, he got him in 31 seconds in the second round. And that was it. That was the end of the fight. There was nothing much to be said. Before you know it, the rest was history because that would be the only time we would ever have a 15-round fight in the minimum weight. Yeah, it started off with the inaugural title fight where, out of nowhere, we would abandon the title in December of 87 in order to fight against Hiroki Ioki's WBC title. Yeah, it said right here, I'm not kidding with you guys. It said right here that Lee vacated it while focusing on winning the WBC belt. And of course, to let you people know, he actually did not get lucky. We already talked about how he lost in round 12 by TKO against Hiroki, and the guy retained out the belt in January, and the rest of his boxing career was history. So yeah, so he lost 2 belts just like that. And also, we already talked about him fighting against Ricardo Lopez in December of 91, where Lopez defeated Kyung Young Lee by 12-round decision. But originally, that was not going to be Kyung Young Lee's last fight. Because later in July of 1993, over a year and a half after that last fight came, it took him a full year and a half to fight again, passing 1992 to fight against Pichit Sethbatran for the IBF flyweight title. And that Thailand guy that would later remain undefeated for his career won by first round knockout against Kyung Young Lee at 1 minute and 2 seconds. And he had a few more title defenses by 94 when he retired, and came back fighting 1 fight in 96 and 2 more fights in 2000 and retired with an undefeated record of 24 wins and 18 knockouts. So yeah, Kyung Young Lee's career just came to an end really bad with those losses. And that was the first. What about the IBF belt? Well, about a couple months after he lost against Hiroki in March, well, Samuth Sivanarapol took on Domingo Lucas for the inaugural belt. And he won with ease. And Pretty Boy Lucas had some great hype in this fight, but originally, guys, this was actually another 15-round bout. And as I'm looking at this on BoxRec, this was a 15-round bout as well. And the fight went on with the stoppage where Samuth win after Lucas was deemed unfit to continue from a cut over the right eye caused by a punch. So after 11 rounds of boxing, they stopped the fight. But wait, that wasn't going to be the last time that we were going to see another 15-round fight. Pretty much, because at this moment, we would get another 15-round bout. Because later, and just to let you guys know, this would be another title defense for him. And with all due to respect, because he was already in the domination at this moment, he was considering how this competition was flying by quickly as a snapping finger. The real competition came in because Samuth from Thailand would go on to make a bigger impact for more than what he was doing. Now, in all fairness, he did have some fails. He lost by knockout fights in his first year in 1982 and 1983, losing fights in 84 and other fights. Even though he was winning some fights, he did defeat a couple interesting big wins in his career, which was surprising during the time when he was losing fights. But after the Oriental fights and other title in 86 and such, he had a problem, because before he defeated Pretty Boy Lucas, an undefeated 17-0-1 fighter, which meant that Samuth was the underdog in that fight, and he won, considering how many losses he had. And Pretty Boy lost his first fight because of that fight, because he had a cut on the right eye, and after 11 rounds of a 15-round bout, he couldn't continue anymore. And it stinks. I can't say much about it, even though Samuth was having some of the rounds won, and he already had a record of 32 wins, 11 losses, and 1 draw, which is not good of a record, and I'm surprised that he actually won the title to begin with. Pretty much. But his next fight would be the last time he would almost defend it, because later in 88, in August the 29th, a decade before I was born, he would fight against a guy with no more than 1 win, 3 losses, and 3 draws. Name In Kyu Hwang, which is a South Korean fighter that would end his career with 3 wins, 9 losses, 3 draws, 1 knockout win, with all 0 fights by knockout losses. This guy's record stinks, and I'm even shocked because they actually said that Hwang In Kyu said that he entered the bout with a reported record of 18 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw. So I guess boxing back then was corrupted. And it still is for some, whatever you say, which is ridiculous, but what the heck do I know? Do I know about all that craziness? And you know what's crazy? That guy with only 1 win, 3 losses, and 3 draws, he actually went the full 15 rounds the distance. He went 15 rounds the distance with a snap of the finger. And the scorecards read 146 to 144, 146 to 142, 147 to 144, all favoring Samuth to retain his title. A guy with a lousy-ass record like that, and he managed to go 15 rounds the distance of how close the bout was, that's ridiculous. And fun fact, guys, August the 29th, 1988, for the IBF World Minimumweight Championship against a guy with a lousy fake record and a guy with a journeyman record, would be the last 2 guys and the last ever 15-round world title bout. August 29th, 1988, the final time boxing ever did a 15-round fight. I don't know what to say about that. I just don't know what to say about that. It just goes to show you guys, there's just a lot of crazy information once you know how shocking it was. So what did Samu do with the rest of his run in the boxing? He took on a guy named Nico Thomas. When he went to Poland, was it Poland? Indonesia, a guy with not much of an interesting record of 7 wins, 6 losses, and 1 draw. And shockingly, the bout ended with a majority draw. 2 scores, 117 even, 115 even, and 1 score, 117 and 113, favoring his opponent, Nico. So what did they do? 3 months later, they had a rematch in a different venue in the same city, in Jakarta. And shockingly enough, Nico Thomas put out the underdog victory with scores of 118 to 109, 119 to 108, and 2 scores, 115 to 111. Nico Thomas became the underdog winner, and that was the last time we would ever see Samu ever fight again in boxing. That was the end of his career. As for our buddy from Indonesia that brought out the upset of all time, sadly, 3 months later, he took on a 25-0-3 fighter named Eric Chavez, and he ended it with a round 5 KO. So that feel-good story moment came to an end, but it's not the last time we're ever going to see that Indonesian fighter again, because he's going to be talked about a little bit soon. So yeah, by 1989 coming to an end, I'm shocked that I'm actually shocked that they actually had some interesting fights, because later in February, before you know it, considering this guy from the Philippines won the title and did it outright with a lazy record against someone, his undefeated record came to an end quickly, because later in February of 1990, he took on a guy named Utaide, a guy from the country of Thailand, and unfortunately, the guy actually put out a good run on himself and completely won the fight with ease. Definitely. He won by 12 rounds of wide margin of 118 to 110, 111 to one of the scores, and surprisingly enough. Fun fact, guys, it's interesting because technically, wait. I'm talking about the second fight. The first fight, it ended in a knockout by TKO when the bout was stopped due to a headbutt clash, but they ended in knockout, considering 2 of the judges favored Eric Chavez that was winning the fight, but they ended in a TKO, so who knows. But later in June, after Joe Constantino, a guy with a 5-1-2 record, went 12 rounds the distance against Utaide, which surprising because he managed to have a bout record, because originally they said that he entered the ring with a bout of a purported record of 10 wins, 2 losses, and 2 draws. Crazy. And they also said that he was rated number 2 of the contender in the IBF. Oh boy, the IBF. Back in those days, Bob Lee Sr. sure made boxing interesting with the IBF and the FBI. And then 2 months later, Eric Chavez had the rematch with him and the 118-110, blah, blah, blah. So what happened to the IBF in the 1990s? Well, a month later, he had a non-title bout, which he won. Only this time, he took on 25-1-1 fighter, Pretty Boy Lucas, for the IBF title. And once you know it, the scores ended with a split decision draw. One favoring the other by domination, the other favoring it by maybe domination, the other favoring it with a draw. Crazy. I will say, though, the resume of these guys boxing each other were far better, and the underdog victories were crazy. Like, for instance, we had Abdi Pohan in July of 1991, a guy with a record of only 3 wins and 2 losses, managed to win rounds in the fight, and surprisingly, almost probably would have done something crazy. And the guy was from Indonesia, so it's crazy. But then in October, a guy named Annie Tabanas had a 17-0 record and went to Thailand after mostly leaving his country of the Philippines to battle for the fight. And even though he lost by 115 to 112 by 2 scores and 116 to 112, considering it be done. But still, I wouldn't really say that, considering with all the stuff that was being done in the fight, they were getting stuff done pretty good in this entire run. The guy was taking on good ranked fighters with undefeated records and wins, because later in February of 92, he took on Felix Naranjo, and with a 13-0-2 record, got him in by round 2 of KO. Then he took on a guy with a lousy record of 0-4 named Said Iskandar. And I do apologize, guys, for saying these names wrong, but it just goes to show you that these Asian fighters and Latin American names are pretty hard to name. This guy had to retire from boxing with a record of 0 wins and 6 losses in the span of 1988 to 1993. And surprisingly, he had a title shot. Guess what? Said actually had entered the bout with a reported record of 26 wins, 5 losses, and 2 draws. So, yeah, some of these records were legit and some were just fake. And the fight went on with a round 8 TKO victory, which I'm surprised the guy managed to become the Sakura Hagiwara, which is hilarious. Yeah, back in those days, guys, bouts were that controversial. And guess what? 3 months later, he took on a guy named Manny Melchor, which I'm sure we have talked about him before. I think we did. Because he actually fought for the WBC belt back in 2001 with Jose Antonio. But I'm sure we can talk about his loss against Ricardo Lopez in 93. But before that, he actually had an underdog victory when he defeated Utaidai by winning this belt by split decision. Unfortunately, guys, 3 months later, in December of 92, another guy named Prathong Anucha also defeated Melchor by split decision as well. Yeah. And at this moment, guys, the world title bouts of the IBF were changing like ridiculous, because at this moment, guys, it was just crazy. And guess what? After Melchor lost against Sor Vorapin, which was his real name, this guy would go on a 12 title fight reign. And surprisingly, he went on perfect for what he was doing. But considering his resume, he had 11-9-2 against Nico Thomas, former champion, which the guy would never box again, as he suffered a round 7 KO knockout against this guy. And, well, technically he would box a few more years with probably a record, but he never boxed again for the title after that loss. As for his other resume, Ala Villamor was a 24-0-1 fighter, which would get brought down in round 5, 6, and 7 for the best win in this guy's career. And fun fact, Anucha also took on Dominguez Silwalet, a guy with an 0-0 record, debut fighter, in September of 93. And no, the guy didn't go the distance. He got knocked down in round 4, and his debut in boxing did not do good, because the next 9 professional fights in his career were all professional losses. So, yeah, another Sakura Hagiwara record. And then later in December, he took on a guy named Felix Naranjo, which I'm sure we've talked about him as well. And he got brought down a couple of times in the first round, only to get his butt finished in the second round. Then in February, Ronnie Magrano was a 19-6 fighter at the time in February of 94 and won 12 rounds of decision, but not good enough. 12-5-1 fighter later in May named Roger Espinoda could not get nothing done after this fight and got knocked down, finished in round 6. In August, we even had a fighter named Marcelino Bolivar, a 17-3 fighter, which is surprising because considering whatever you like to say, well, he couldn't get nothing done after he got knocked down in the second, and considering both guys were down, but he did put a good effort knocking him down and their opponents down, but after round 4, nothing was said. And then in November, Carlos Alberto was his next opponent, another journeyman fighter. Went round 3 by TKO, and that was it. He took on another journeyman fighter named Jerry Pajade, and in February of 95, another third round knockout win. And then he got another scored knockout for a second round knockout against 13-3-2 fighter named Alfonso Flores in May. So the resume there isn't much. He would later go for a non-title bout in August against a 3-11-2 fighter, only to fight against a 7-1 fighter named Jack Russell. And surprisingly, that guy got knocked out in round 2. And unfortunately, right there, well, from Australia, even the Australians couldn't get nothing done there. And all of these fights were taking place in Thailand. This guy was destroying competition. Later in December that year, he took on a guy named Guerrero Osvaldo, and surprisingly, you might know of him, considering he only went 6 rounds by a knockout here, getting dominated, but this guy originally had some interesting plans. Because Osvaldo, fun fact, I have had some words to talk about him and his career. In all fairness, because he would go on as a Colombian fighter. I wouldn't really say that he was much of a fighter, but he was one of those guys that were not much of a quitter. Like, he was actually involved in some boxing fights, but never, he might have been one of the greatest Mexicans to never get a chance for a good title shot after this, because consider the guy's resume for 50 fights was not a good thing. But you get to tell. But back then, it was really different for what it was. Unfortunately, guys, the next boxing match would, guys, the title reign would come to an end on March the 16th, 1996. He would have continued dominating the boxing world quickly, just like Ricardo Lopez was doing at the time. Unfortunately, at the time, you had to be under 105 pounds to make weight. His opponent, Lee Sandoval, a 9-4-1 fighter, was at that number. Anucha was at 107 pounds. The title for his opponent, Lee, was on the line, but he failed to make weight. He won the fight by round 11 TKO, but technically, because they had to strip him of the title the day before the fight happened, meaning that title reign he lost it. But later in May of 96, 2 months later, he would get another crack at the title again against June Arroz, a 13-4-1 fighter. And surprisingly, he would retain the title or become 2-time champion again. But sadly, by 96 and 97, his next title defenses were right there. There was nothing interesting. 17-7-4 fighter in July, not much of a fighter there, named John Orjaliza, round 3 KO. He scores a round 5 KO against Oscar Andrade, a 14-14 fighter. And then he scores an 8-2 record fighter named Gustavo Vera in a round 2 KO. He gets a non-title fight 2 months later in January, goes in March against Luis Doria, a 13-1 fighter, which was a better record than anyone else, scored a round 4 TKO, and then took on Juan Herrera, which was a good, close 12-round fight in June, and surprisingly a good win there. And then takes on Wellington Vincent, a 11-1 fighter, and scores a round 2 TKO. That is until he took on the fighter that I actually talked about before. Oh, yeah, and by the way, just to let you guys know, this is the moment where things change. Because this is the moment, guys, where things change. Because later in December 27th, 1997, a boxer in the division would be the guy that would be known for his final world title bout. His name was Zolani Petello. Yes, guys, the man that took on Ricardo Lopez in September 2001, which was Lopez's last fight. And, of course, I said it before, Arthur McCanty Sr.'s last bout of refereeing a fight. And guess what? Zolani won by dominating in 4 rounds of TKO, ending the reign of Anucha's career. He did. And you think Zolani's title reign was a fluke because of that win? Well, maybe. He took on a guy named Faisal Akbar in his country in South Africa, where he brought the belt back home when he went to the guy's country to win the belt. He scored a 12-round split decision against that fighter in March, win in July against Carmelo Carqueras, a 16-2-2 fighter, and won by a round 7 TKO, and then scored a first-round KO against Eric Jamili in a 13-7-1 record in May, only to retain the title against a 16-7-5 fighter, an interesting journeyman, and a guy that was a better contender than anyone else on this entire roster, named Juanito Rubilar, by a close 12-round decision, unanimous decision. Only for June of 2000, when he fought against Mickey Cantwell, another guy I have talked about before in the minimum weight. Well, he just couldn't get the job done against our good old buddy here. Scored a round 8 TKO, and Zolani Petello decided to vacate the title. Why? Well, by November the 2nd of 2000, he moved up to weight. Another boxer moved up to weight. So, yeah. And you're probably wondering, did he do good going to the light flyweight division? Well, he won a fight in April of 2001 that got him up to the rankings. And surprisingly, he got a fight against Ricardo Lopez. He just didn't get the job done. And, of course, his last 2 fights in 2005 he shouldn't have never fought, but what can I say about him? Still, Zolani Petello probably did a better job in the minimum weight of retiring his belt there a lot more, but unfortunately, there wasn't much to be said. And guys, we can talk about how, guys, I know we can talk about how Anucha Pranthong also fought for the IBF light flyweight against Will Grisby in 98, and then fought against Lopez in December of 2000, Lopez's second last fight and such. But yet again, this isn't about the light flyweight division. This is about the minimum weight division, and that's the truth. That's the truth right there. Like, there's nothing much I can say about this, because at this moment, guys, we're already halfway done through the entire boxing list here. So I will say, though, guys, there is a lot of controversies with the records and such, and the reported records that are fake and such, but nothing much could be said. Because, guys, the IBF did bring in something that we were trying to get for a long time. In Mexico, Roberto Carlos Leiva took on Daniel Reyes in New York. A Colombian fighter and a Mexican fighter later go on with not much of a record at all. When the title was vacated, these two fought for it. The fight ended with a unanimous decision. Man. Roberto, ladies and gentlemen, was just new in the boxing, but it didn't stop him. Daniel Reyes was a 25-0 fighter with 18-0 fighter named Roberto. These guys would go on to battle each other in a 12-round bout. After 12 rounds of boxing, both guys were scoring points at each other. They were both murdering each other. This would be the first ever legit minimum weight title bout that was ever a talked about fight. Roberto did the job. He scored a round 8 knockout. And after 12 rounds of boxing, judges had it 114 to 113. Two others, 115 to 112, favoring unanimous decision. Roberto Carlos, a 21-year-old kid in his first 3 years of pro, went out there and made history. It's amazing of how someone did that. And of course, you might think his title reign was a fluke, but at least he was trying. For instance, he took on Miguel Barrera, a 20-0-1 fighter, in September of 2001, the 28th, around the same time during the Trinidad and Hopkins fight and such, which is ridiculous. And the fight ended in a technical decision when Roberto got dominated, but it said that they had an accidental headbutt or something or an injury, and they had to stop the fight after 3 rounds, but they didn't go the distance of technical, so it ended in a draw, which stinks. In 2002, he had a couple non-title fights against nobodies and fought against Miguel Barrera in a rematch. Only this time, Barrera got the win by close fights of 115 to 113 and one judge scoring it 116 to 12. They had a third rematch, trilogy match, in March 22nd, where Barrera this time scored a third-round KO in the Mandalay Bay. First match was in Mexico. The second match was in Las Vegas in Oriole Islands Hotel Casino, and this was the resort Mandalay Bay. And that was the end of the title reign. We can talk about how Ivan Calderon defeated Roberto about a year later, but why would we? We just talked about the WBO the last time. Well, Miguel Barrera, he continued on doing nothing else after this, because after he had a great trilogy against this opponent, which might not be the best, 2 months later, he fought against 29-10-2 mega underdog fighter named Edgar Cardenas. And after the judges' scorecards had some controversies in it, after 9 rounds of close competition, Edgar scored an upset victory against the undefeated fighter of Miguel. And sadly, Miguel never went back again because he underwent surgery the following day due to a equilibrial blood clot. He was taken on a stretcher in the ring when he got injured that day, and when Cardenas ended his career, Miguel Barrera's boxing career came to an end because of that. It just goes to show you, boxing is that, it's mean. It just takes your soul out. And by the way, guys, as for Edgar Cardenas, Daniel Reyes fought against Cardenas later that year in October in the Staples Center in Los Angeles and scored a round 6 knockout victory to defeat Edgar Cardenas to win the title. And then Daniel went on to fight against Roberto Carlos Leiva for the IBF belt, scored that fight as well, and he got the job done this time. He didn't get done in 2001, but he got their rematch done, and sadly, well, he took on a longtime journeyman fighter in the country of Indonesia named Mohamed Rachman, 58 5-4 fighter. And guess what? Rachman, this longtime fighter, went into the division and won the split decision fight. The rest of Daniel Reyes' career was history. He had some WBO interim fights, wins are here there, but that was the end of his career. As for Rachman, after winning that belt in 2004, he would go on to retain the belt by a close technical draw after a head clash against someone named Utaide. I think we already know who that guy was. I'm surprised that he's still boxing. The former IBF champion at the time when he was a champion. And somehow he continued retaining title against guys named Omar Soto, a 14-2-1, and in his first mandatory fight title for Rachman. And before you know it, went on and just pushed on as for Rachman because he took on Benji Sorola, a 24-12-13 fighter later in December of 2006 by a round 7 TKO. And then, well, Florante Condas in July the 7th, 2007, another great historical moment. He lost the fight by a close split decision. After Rachman got knocked down in round 3 and round 4, well, two judges had 114 to 112 even, and the other had it 115 to 111, favoring the winner. Yeah, Florante Condos went on to win that title. And as for Mohamed Rachman, he went on for his WBC belt in 2009, and, well, he never won the belt. As for anyone else that was involved in the division at the time, well, to be honest, guys, you're going to be surprised because Florante Condas took on Raul Garcia, the former of minimum-weight champion. Yeah, seriously. Raul Garcia, former, like, this guy. Now, guys, remember when I talked about him against Romel Asenjo and when he lost against Moses Fuentes in 2011 when he won the WBO belt and retained it? And, well, before he did that in 2010 when he was interim champion, he fought for the title against Condos in 2008 in June and got a round 12 split decision victory. Even when he got knocked out in round 12, he still managed to win the fight. He was the minimum weight title eliminator against Ronald Barrero in February of 2008, won that fight. And his two title defenses in that year of 2008 in September and December were against the same fighter, Jose Luis Varela. 15-4-5 fighter, and both fights were dominated. Nothing much to be said. His fight against Ronald Barrera in a rematch was nothing special. 6-round knockout in April, and then took on Sammy Ortiz in a 12-round decision, close majority decision, only to lose against this guy from the country of Africa named Kosinathai Joy. Can't pronounce his name. And shockingly, this 20-0 South African fighter won the title just like that. He became minimum weight champion, and surprisingly, I wouldn't really say he deserved it, but I think when you look at this from a perspective point, I will say, though, it's great that Raul Garcia managed to be champion in some of this weight class. Unfortunately, the real story came in where the South African fighter had problems. After he was the title eliminator against Florante Condos in June, several months before his win against this fight for the title eliminator, it was surprising. his title defenses were against two of the same guys, and that was Katsunari Takayama. The first fight was in January 2011, and it ended in a no contest after 3 rounds for reasons I can't find the information, and had the rematch again in March of 2012, a full 14 months. And he defended the title until he took on Mario Rodriguez, a 14-6-4 fighter. And sadly, he got knocked out in Mexico by a huge, devastating KO victory. And yeah, he would get a couple more shots in an IBO belt, but even though he would become IBO World Minimum Weight Champion 2019 and lose, which is a great story moment there. But all in all, I wouldn't really say that his career really took off hard than anyone else did, but the real story did came a lot sooner. So guys, when I tried to follow along what I was looking at here, it was actually ironic for me. Because in the IBF, only 3 title vacancies have happened in the IBF. So for reasons why that's the case, who knows why? I'm serious. I don't know why that's the reason for it, why we don't have a lot of title vacancies here, but it doesn't make sense. After Mario Rodriguez won the title, I wouldn't really say that his reign was any different than anyone else's, because it wasn't. He just held on to the belt until March the 30th, and then he lost against Katsunari Takayama in his country of Mexico. There's nothing much I can say about it. It ended in a close, good 12-round decision, and Takayama just became champion in the minimum weight with ease. So some of these minimum weight boxers at the time were fighting for world titles at the time in their division. I just think at the time you had a guy from Thailand that was taking on nobodies named Moonsri, and you had other fighters, and there were guys from other countries, from Latin America and Asia, battling for the belts. And I think that's the problem, because there wasn't a lot of competition to it than meets the eye. Because, guys, what I'm looking at here is a problematic. There were so many red flags here that I wouldn't really say that there was much to it here, because these countries and continents do have talent. I just think when you look at this right now, and I'm looking at the title fights, I'm looking at everything. I said this before and I'll say it again. It's a forgotten division that no one really cares about. The minimum weight is a really hard division to dominate in when you're taking on competition that you don't know much about, because it's hard to rank what fighters that you might see in the division, because at the end of the day, there's not a lot to be talked about. Because, guys, over 80% of the people I've named in this entire podcast, I really don't know a lot of the names that I'm talking about. Except Japanese fighters. Pretty much. But yeah, yet again, I do question it, because there's still some African fighters out there that are also boxing for the title as well. And that does go to say for certain, because after the IBF belt was won by Takayama, like, the resume in boxing is really hard to box today, because in December he fights against Virgilio Silvano, 17-2-1 fighter. He goes 12 rounds the distance. Then he takes on Shin Ono, a 17-5-2 record fighter, also in both the Bodymaker Coliseum Osaka, the same venue, and he knocks him down in 10-12, goes 12 rounds to decision. Perfect. And then he fights for the unified belt. He fights for the WBO champion, Francisco Rodriguez. And of course, I've talked about this before, guys. Rodriguez did beat him only in August, and then in December, Francisco vacants the belt, which this makes sense because he vacated the belt in order to, Rodriguez's title was vacated when a bout was ordered for the vacant on October. And all bouts were there. So I think he left the weight class for good. So Takayama went back in December the 31st, 2014 against Go Odera or Odaira, and he won the fight by round 7, as I said before. And then he vacated the WBO belt only to fight against Utaide Tirumfong, which ended in a technical decision of round 9 TD decision in April. Then goes to September against Ryoji Hara for the IBF belt as well, and went to win by TKO. And that was it. Because later in December the 31st, Jose Agrumendo, a 16-3-1 fighter, made an underdog victory when after both fighters got hurt or one was unable to continue. After 9 rounds of boxing, they stopped the fight and went to a technical decision. One score read it 86-85 for Takayama, but the other two scores 87-84 favored Jose, the winner. And of course, even though Takayama would go on later in August that year to win the WBO belt, and then he vacated the belt to go up to light flyweight, which was not good enough, so he went back to minimum weight. But of course, that was during 2020 when he actually did vacate the belt to retire, and then fought back in 2020 and 2024 to win the IBO World Minimum Weight title belt. But like I said before, guys, the minimum weight belt, in my opinion, for the IBO is not going to be included here as much than you people think. It's ridiculous. So, yeah, I think this is the moment where I now get stuck. Because the moment came differently. Because, guys, in the 2010s, we've had some interesting boxers. Because, guys, back in the early of the end of the 2000s, a lot of boxers tried finding success. Even though new faces were there, from Denver Kilo to Kazuto Ioka. Also, fun fact, he is also the nephew of the 1980s champion Hiroki Ioka. If I didn't recall that before, which I didn't, in the latter part of the decade. It is crazy that Thai boxers returned to domination at the time, with a couple guys winning titles, staying undefeated for some time. But still, there wasn't, as of 2025 right now, there's not a lot of information we can talk about of, is there any other boxer that's going to be in the division to dominate this weight class? Well, guys, after Jose won the title, he went back to Mexico to, by 2016 to 2017, I wouldn't say there's not a lot of success in this division for boxers fighting, considering who you think got over at the time during the 2010s. this guy, Jose, was different. You see, after he defeated Julio Mendoza in July, a nobody fighter by 12 rounds of decision, then took on a 17-5-1 fighter named Jose Jimenez and went round 3 by TKO, and then defeated an 8-round TKO stoppage against Gabriel Mendoza after getting cut and suffered punches to the eye and such, this or that. And he left the fight on. And then by the end of May, 2 months later in July, he went back to Japan to fight against someone else named Hiroto Kyoguchi. And guess what? Kyoguchi actually defeated the Mexican fighter that went to his backyard. So, gamble well paid off. You got to give him credit. You got to give the guy a shine for his money. So, who is Kyoguchi? Well, Kyoguchi, not much of a fighter, just like Jake Paul. Well, his first 7 professional fights were undefeated with 1-1, 0 debut fighter, 10-2-1 fighter, 8-3-1, 7-3-3, 25-14-3, and 16-5-5. With 6 knockout wins in the first fight, and the 7th fight is a decision. So after 7 professional fights, this guy won his 8th professional fight by winning the world IBF title. But the guy wouldn't hold on for the gold for that long, because by December, he took on Carlos Buitrago for a 32-1 fighter, a long-time fighter, and finished him by dominating him in 8 rounds of a knockout. Defeated Vince Parras, a 13-0 undefeated fighter, and won 12 rounds by decision until the guy vacated the belt to go up to light flyweight. And believe me, guys, is that going to be the last time we're going to hear that? Not really, because it's going to happen sooner, because later, fun fact, later, a guy named Carlos Licona came out of nowhere and boxed. Not just he won the WBO Latino minimum weight champion in April of 2018, he decided to vacate that belt away to fight against a 9-0 fighter named Mark Anthony Barringa. Both of these guys were undefeated. And surprisingly, this is the interesting thing. Carlos Licona, born in Mexico, was representing the USA at the time, meaning that even though he was a full-blooded U.S. citizen, even though born in Mexico, this would be the first time we would ever have an American to become champion. And guess what? Mark Anthony Barringa from the Philippines could not get the job done, and Licona won by 12-round split decision after having his opponent getting a cut due to a headbutt, but after 3 judges scoring it 115 and 113, 2 of them favoring the winner, Licona was a champion and won. But unfortunately, guys, a guy named DJ Creel, which is a pretty fun name to talk about, which that guy is from South Africa, won by a round 12 TKO victory in Microsoft Theater in Los Angeles. After Licona was winning the fight by scorecards of 108 to 101 by 2 of the scores, and 105 to 104 favoring DJ Creel, which is a fun name. Sadly, he got knocked down twice, and with 44 seconds left of the bout, the fight was stopped, and the guy fought one more time 5 months later, but never fought again. And that was the end of the Americans trying to get a big push in the minimum weight. Hate to see it. And as for DJ Creel, which is a pretty fun name, he actually vacated the title on July the 4th that same year to go up to light flyweight. Why? So later in September the 7th, 2 months later, Pedro... so 2 months later, on September the 7th, Pedro Tendrin took on Samuel Salva, and Pedro won. It won't be the last time he'll win the IBF belt. Even currently, still holding on to the belt, which I wish he didn't. Would go on to defeat Samuel in the Philippines. Yeah. After Tendrin was knocked down once in the first round, Salva was deducted a point in intentional headbutting, but technically that would actually end his run, and by the end of round 4, due to that injury, the fight was won by Pedro. And then later in September and February the 1st, he took on Daniel Valladares in Mexico, which ended in a technical draw due to another controversial moment, which I won't talk about. And then a full year later, on February the 27th, 2001, Rene Marc Cuarto, another guy from the Latin American area, as all others, actually defeated Pedro by unanimous decision, as the Philippine fighter Rene Marc came out to defeat an unbelievable win with ease. And this guy would go on to have a rematch with Pedro later in February the next year, another full 24 months, and he retained the title by technical majority decision, which was close enough due to another controversial moment of an intentional headbutting. Oh yeah, and then Daniel Valladares, well, he lost his first chance, but at least he defeated Rene this time in July the 1st that same year to win by split decision. So pretty much that's all needs to be said about that. Because guys, at this moment, the Latin Americans and the Asians are just in utter domination in this division as we speak. But that's when the moment gets more controversial. Because Jinjiro Shigeoka would not be so fortunate into his boxing career because of what happened about a couple months ago, where Jinjiro Shigeoka and him in Edion Arena in Osaka, Japan, on January the 6th, 2023, both guys fought each other in the ring. But in the third round, both guys went through an accidental of batting. Valladares could not continue the game due to accidental batting. So the fight ended in a no contest. Damn. But then in October the 7th, Jinjiro did got his best win. After his best win, when Daniel dominated him in 4 rounds by all scorecards, favoring Daniel. But shockingly, Jinjiro, out of nowhere, scored out an upset victory in the 5th round to win. Which is kind of shocking, considering how any of that happened. But I think you can already tell that Udai and Jinjiro Shigeoka brothers were not going to get a big push. Now, in all fairness, guys, considering, fun fact though, before the rematch happened on April the 16th, Jinjiro did have the IBF interim minimum weight title against Rene Marc Cuarto, which won by round 9 KO. So just in case if this happened again, we'll see who won. Now, later in March the 31st, he would be the only brother to defend out his title rightfully, because he took on a guy named Jake Amparo and won by round 2 KO. Only later in July the 28th, he lost against Pedro Tendrin by a round 9 TKO loss. And he got dominated easily by barely winning no more than just a couple rounds. Yeah, the Shigeoka brothers became failures. Even Yudai failed hardcore. And Jinjiro, on May the 24th, his career ended when they had a rematch with Pedro. And after 12 rounds of competition, the scorecards read one judge scoring at 115 to 113 for Jinjiro. The other judge scored it same, only this time to Pedro. And then the Japanese judge that was there, the only Japanese judge that was judging the fight that night, gave it 118 to 110 for Pedro. Yeah, I'm not kidding, guys. Because, guys, they had one Japanese judge. Okay, here. They had one Japanese judge scored it 118 to 110 for Pedro. And then they had a Filipinos judge and an American judge. The American judge gave it 115 to 113 to Jinjiro. The Filipinos judge gave it to Pedro. So that would have made you wonder what the Japanese judge would have given it to Jinjiro. But no. He gave it a wide 118 to 110 for Pedro to retain his title. And for all that, Shigeoka would go to the hospital due to that horrific injury and the entire beating he got. And that was the end of his career. And at this moment, Yudai Shigeoka, the Shigeoka brothers were the biggest busts in boxing history. And it really upsets me because I was really trying to support them. But just goes to show you, sometimes you didn't get it. Sometimes you got the talent and sometimes you don't. And that's the way life goes. But yet again, guys, you can let us know in the comments. Because at this moment, guys, boxing will always be a dangerous sport. But when we look back at it, it is what it is. And even though as of right now, Pedro, as he is still in the top corner for all other boxers battling each other, there is a few interesting fighters in the resume as of today that are in the boxing division right now. So whatever's going to happen right now, it's going to happen. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have to save my breath of energy for the final round. Because tomorrow we are going to review the WBA. Now, guys, I'm going to save my energy for next time. And even though today it is August the 8th right now as I'm recording this, because I'm recording this a lot later in video editing in the future. But considering all of this being said, tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, we will review the WBA minimum weight champion. And it's going to be the regular belt as well. And the super belt. And whatever you say is the legit champion, well, we'll see. But for now, guys, thank you for watching this. And technically, I need all the breath I can take. Yeah. Because, guys, rambling about this type of information for over 1 hour is a lot. So keep that in mind. Because next time, we're going to talk about it. The WBA Minimum Weight Championship. And as always, guys, thank you for watching the podcast. And see you next time. Thank you.